Good afternoon, everybody. How are we doing? Welcome to HomeGames, and welcome to a familiar guest from last year. Please give a normal, upstanding welcome to Mr. John Rowland, MD of CICEROAMO. We are doing politics and lobbying and all that kind of stuff today, and John joins us directly from his sauna, which is nice of him.
Yeah, exactly. Well, or ski chalet. It depends what time of the year it is. It's multi-purpose, this room.
Amazing. But I can't wait for this chat. We had a brilliant time last year, and I feel sure we can do the same. We've maybe, I don't know if we've got more to talk about this year or not. We haven't Brexited last time.
Yeah, we've got even more. We've got all the stuff that we had to talk about last year, plus some new stuff this year.
Yeah, although Dominic Cummings may not play such a big role, watching it back, and we talked quite a lot about Big Dom.
We did.
So we'll maybe not do him so much. But listen, before we dive in, as many of you know, my mum passed away last weekend, weekend before last. And I just wanted to say a quick thank you to everyone that sent messages and all that kind of stuff. There's been this astonishing kind of wave of kindness. And I know it's not unique to me, and I know people are so generous and do that for people in these kind of situations. But if you ever wonder, if you haven't been through it, if you ever wonder if stuff like that makes a difference, it proper does. It really, really does. So even if, you can't always say thank you to everyone or whatever, I know many of you on the call looking down the names have sent me notes and stuff, and it's hugely appreciated, not just by me, but by my dad and the rest of the family as well. So thank you very, very, very much. We won't dwell on any of that stuff, except to say that my mum used to go nuts for HomeGames. Like, she loved it. And right up until she wasn't able to anymore, she would watch it even on crappy hospital Wi-Fi, usually not live. She'd do it on YouTube, and I'd get like a crit for each one. I didn't like that chap. I didn't think he was very good. Why are you wearing that t-shirt? That's ridiculous. Why are you doing it? I don't think you should have him on again, but she liked John, so we were all good. Anyway, the thing that took mum is something that takes many people over the years, and it kills you slowly, and it's called multiple sclerosis. So we are fundraising, and I'm not above a naked cash grab. So the little green action button at the bottom of your screen is for MS. And if you do feel able, I know everybody wants your money, but I'm the guy that wants your money in this 45 minutes. So if you do feel able and you've got a spare couple of quid, that would be a really, really lovely thing, and very much appreciated by all of us and MS Scotland as well. Last bit of housekeeping. I'm popping the usual wee link into the chat. If any of you have any audiovisual problems, just click on that and they will sort themselves out magically, probably. Or if they don't, I can't help you. So that's all there is to that. So all that done, let's dive in, John. I mean, it hasn't quite been a year, has it? It was early June.
It was June, wasn't it? Yeah.
Last time, and we were talking about, could we possibly be going through Brexit when we've got a pandemic to worry about right in the early days of HomeGames? So I want to touch back on all of that. But first things first, CICEROAMO, your business. Some of our guests might not know you all that well. So would you like to have a free hit and tell us a little bit about what you get up to?
Yeah, CICEROAMO is what we call an integrated communications consultancy. But in real money, what that means is we lobby, we do PR, we do some thought leadership and market research stuff, and we have guys that do digital and social media. So most of our clients are big financial services companies, but over the years, our client base is diversified very broadly. You'll see that's a Saab, Grip and FiceJet, so that's one of my clients as well. It's not just finance, it's all sorts of stuff, high tech, engineering, you name it, we've got it on our client books. But really our heritage is in financial services. That's why most people would know us. And that's the practice that I work in and lead.
Brilliant. And you had a tolerable pandemic so far? Are things kind of holding up?
I mean, for our business, the first couple of months of the pandemic were absolutely brutal last year. I mean, it was horrible. It was almost like the financial crisis. Just clients were cancelling, projects were being delayed or cancelled, and it was nasty. And then it stabilized, and I have to say the beginning of 2021 has been astonishingly busy. So we've kind of gone through this. I mean, if Andy Haldane's right and this is a coiled spring of an economy, I think we're beginning to see that in our business. The vaccination drive has really boosted business confidence. People are confident about spending money on communications again. But in my business, the public affairs side of the business, which is the public policy and the lobbying work, we've been busy all throughout because government has been so engaged in every avenue of the economy, every aspect of the economy, that there's been an almost insatiable demand from clients to know what's going on. And then that was all going on whilst the exit negotiations were happening as well. So it's been a hard 12 months for sure. But I think we're coming out the other side of it now.
Yeah, and it's if you're thinking, particularly for these large businesses that do have budget to spend on things like public affairs and lobbying, that last year really wasn't the time to stop.
That's right. So I would say anything that was to do with discretionary spend around marketing, that side of stuff, a lot of that was put on ice. But where firms were having to engage with government around COVID support packages, having to understand how the restrictions were affecting social distancing, return to office, all of that stuff, we've been all over that. And there's also the comparative part as well. We provide a lot of insight on what's going on in other countries as well. So if you've got an international business, we'd be providing a rolling update on what's going on from country to country as well. And that wasn't something I was expecting to be doing in January of last year.
No, I don't think any of us quite expected this. I certainly didn't expect to be sitting in my basement talking to you via Crowdcast in April 2021. My goodness. And so give us an insight, if you would, particularly with larger financial businesses that you work with. What did they get involved in this extraordinary period in the last year? What's exercising them in terms of public affairs and interacting with government? Is it just practical stuff like big office blocks and what the hell do we do, or is there other areas of public policy that they can help with? So
last year there were two big things. It was Brexit, what on earth is going on? Although I will say that most businesses were not really involved in advocacy around the Brexit. They said, this is politics now. We're just going to get ready for no deal and see what happens. We'll plan for no deal and hope for something better. There was all of the implementation of the COVID support packages. So if you were a retail bank, SIBLs and all of those things, that was really important. So there was that practical implementation of the government support packages, understanding what was going on there. But those were the two big things. What's changed this year is that there is now actual public policy happening. Like there's non-COVID, non-Brexit stuff happening. Everything is related back to those two things. But for example, if you look in the financial sector, the government is continuing this thing called FRF, which is a review of the entire financial regulatory framework following the onshoring of powers from the European financial regulators. We've got a review of Solvency II. So if you're in the insurance business, that's really interesting. We've got stuff around Khalifa and fintech. Is that how much of that's going to be implemented? There's the Hill review on the London listings. The government is going to do a study of UK capital markets and bring proposals forward on competitiveness of UK capital markets. So that is just like a tidal wave of stuff that's coming down towards the industry. Now, smaller players maybe are a little bit downstream of some of that stuff, but these are big things that change the way that our whole ecosystem operates, or potentially could change the way our ecosystem operates.
Oh, that's really interesting. And I knew some of those things were kind of on the way. I knew about Khalifa and FRF, but there's some stuff in there I didn't know about. And it'll be, obviously for advisors that are on this and trying to advise clients, these things are always kind of wait and see. But it's kind of reassuring to know, not that I have any particular love, as I think we may have discussed last year. I don't know if I have particular love for the current denizens of Whitehall, but at least there's something else going on, right?
Yes, there is.
That there's something else to talk about. But one of the things, and John actually from Sparrows, hi John, one of our regulars, has beaten me to it actually, because you said lobbying. And lobbying is quite an interesting topic, isn't it, at the moment? So I spent this morning cackling gently at Dyson and Boris kind of saying, "Oh, it was all fine, it was all fine, it was all fine." We're allowed to text each other, and then we have Greensill and David Cameron and Rishi Sunak and all the rest of it. So before we kind of dive into whether some people have been naughty or not, tell us a little bit about lobbying, right? Because it's like, for me, it's like the inside of the scrum. If you're there, you know what goes on, and if you're not, you really don't. So what is that world? How does it work?
Lobbying, if I look at my day, how much of it is actually lobbying is actually quite small. So I would describe myself as a political consultant. So a lot of what my job is helping people understand what's going on. Then I might advise them on how they might influence the discussion. But as a consultant, very rarely am I somebody sending a message. I might be drafting a letter for somebody to send to a ministerial office. But I think people, if somebody work shadowed me for a day, they would be extraordinarily bored by a large amount of it. I mean, if you come in as a graduate political consultant, a lot of what you'll be doing is doing stakeholder maps or lists, which is basically an Excel list of all of the MPs who are interested in a subject that you might want to talk to. And it's actually quite a process driven. It can be quite process driven. Now, what my boss, Ian Anderson, would say, and you might have seen him on the television, some of you will know him. He's a guy that looks a bit like Michael Gove, sounds a bit like Michael Gove. And he's been on the television an awful lot, having a go about what's been going on. This is another lobbying scandal that doesn't actually feature professional lobbyists. This is a problem of the revolving door between the private sector and politics. So people that have been in high political office that then go on for big money appointments in business, not because they know anything other than they have a big contact book and they can WhatsApp the right people. Now, what I would say as a professional lobbyist is what we do is much more transparent and much more above board. We declare who our clients are. If we do lobbying, it's through official channels. It would go in through a ministerial office. It would be logged. So this idea of kind of turning up and having a cup of tea with Rishi Sunak and saying, Rishi, you know, what do you think about this? That's not the way we operate. What I think the whole Greensill thing has done is shone a light on an area of lobbying which is completely behind the scenes. And it's been quite cozy. Actually, where all the attention has been is on what people like me do, which is actually in some ways the least exciting or least racy part of the lobbying world. And then there are all sorts of individuals who are, you know, I'm a consultant, but most organisations would hire in-house lobbyists themselves. And again, what they do is not particularly subject to any form of code of conduct or legal regulation. So what I would call for is a level playing field where lobbyists, whoever they are, follow a proper code of conduct and are subject to statutory transparency.
And so if I'm a rich dude, and I happen to have WhatsApp details for whoever, for Matt Hancock, and I fancy a contract for somebody, wherever else, and I send him a note, does he have to record that?
I don't think he does. And I think that one of the interesting things is that there's a difference between what are considered private communications and what are government communications. And what we also have in this country is this sort of awkward distinction between the what's political and what's a matter of government. And Nicola Sturgeon got caught out by this as well, because she claimed that some of the stuff that she was doing was, well, it was political and therefore not an issue of government. But, those two things overlap. So, for example, one of the areas which is always questionable in Britain is what role do party donors have? Now, you don't donate to a party. You might donate to a party because you really believe in the cause, but there are people that donate because they want some form of political access, and that's kind of part of the deal, right? You put 20 grand into the donors club, you sit next to a minister, and you get to bend their ear, and that's how Robert Jenrick got caught out. Now, nobody's given me another way to fund political parties that is convincing. So as long as that's the way it's done, clearly, if you're a powerful person or you can donate money, you're going to have privileged access. Now, there's another moral question there about, well, why shouldn't Dyson be able to lobby the government? He was being asked to make he would say, I was being asked to make ventilators. It was a national emergency. I needed to sort this thing out. And Boris says, don't worry, in a time of national crisis, I'll sort it for you. Now, what I think people would question there is, well, how would other people go about getting that change? Who else has a direct line to the Prime Minister? And I think that's the question there, isn't it? It's like, who gets that access, and how is it recorded, and how do we know who's talking to who, and why are they talking to those individuals? And I think that opacity at the moment is a big part of the problem.
Yeah, it's the opportunity cost, isn't it? About, okay, you heard from Jimmy Dyson because he is who he is, but there's plenty of other firms that maybe could have done a better job, and whose hoovers don't break quite as quickly. So what about the guys that make Henry? That's what I want to know. Do they have?
Can they call it? And the answer is no. Of course they can't.
They can't. Yeah. So not Jimmy Dyson. And so, do you? I mean, this is obviously blown up, and I'm interested in the green seal thing as well, which is a little bit. You can kind of see the Dyson one. You say, I can do this, but you've got to help my guys out because
exactly.
Get hammered. And it is that question you're talking about. The green seal one seems I understand it less well, I guess. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about what's happened there. But I guess the kind of overall kind of feeling of this kind of from the last year with the contracts for the PPE and all the rest of it is this a government that's finding this stuff harder to negotiate than previous governments have found it? Are they kind of more mired in this stuff? Because I imagine every administration has a smack of this stuff going on.
I mean, this is part. I think this idea that it's a uniquely new thing is clearly not tenable. But I think the scale of procurement at such speed creates much more space for informality in procurement processes. So if you know somebody who says they can get you masks and you need masks, then it doesn't really matter where they come from or who they are. You'll do that. Now, I think there will be a lot of lessons learned, but I don't think people should forget just how desperate it was, in March, April, May of last year. But I think what we need is a process that is able to deal with national crises and do that in an above board and transparent way, where conflicts of interest are understood and dealt with as necessary. By the way, that informality also gave us one of the great triumphs of last year, as well as some of the disasters, which was our Kate Bingham's appointment as head of the vaccines task force. Now, at the time, that was attacked as massive cronyism. She's married to Jesse Norman, Tory MP, and actually, she was part of a team that did something quite astonishing. So I think you've got to be a bit careful about how you talk about now. Green seal. I think Sean has said green seal complete abuse. Let's talk about that one specifically. I find this one an extraordinary head scratcher. Jeremy Hayward met Green Seal when they were at Citibank. So here you go. This is guys that have met in the private sector. Hayward goes back to be permanent secretary and says, this guy is awesome. We're leaving money on the table here. So he's sort of bought in, circumventing all the process as a government advisor. Then clearly, as he's a government advisor, he gets to know all the players. He goes back out into the private sector again. And because of that connectivity, obviously, his business has got itself into places that it wouldn't have done otherwise. Now, again, I do find it rather astonishing how it is that kind of process has happened by osmosis, right? So Bill, you have the case of Bill Crothers. He was a civil servant who was moonlighting. You're getting all this sort of stuff going on. You think, do the rules allow this? How is this possible? I think a lot of that's going to have to be cleaned up immediately. The risk again here is that often we say, or how many times do we say this in business? The problem is with government is there aren't enough people who understand business in government. Mm-hmm. So you bring in high-profile, ambitious people from government from the private sector who, by definition, have an interest in policy and politics and how that all works together. But by doing that, you immediately create the risk that you have these sort of situations coming about, because once somebody's been in government and they know the prime minister and they know all the top officials, they can't unknow them. They're obviously in the future going to use some of that for for at least to advantage themselves commercially, even if there's nothing improper about the way they do it. That is a valuable thing to have. So for in all of this, there is this constant walking of this balance, but it seems to me that the system is far too lax and has been far too open to abuse.
Last year, we said, as we were chatting through some things, that basically a lot of the things that we were talking about just weren't important. It wouldn't matter. Dominic Cummings and Barnard Castle eye tests and whatever, which I still haven't tried. But best name for a beer ever. None of it was really that important because there was a huge majority. Brexit was more important and all that kind of stuff. And is that the case here? Like this is an administration that's basically untouchable because of that super majority.
It does feel like that. Interesting. I always ask myself the question when I do these things. If you'd asked me that question 4 months ago, would I've massively changed my view? Now, if we've been having this conversation in December just before Christmas, I would have told you Boris Johnson is in deep shit. He's in big trouble. He's mismanaged all of this. His personal approval ratings are tanking. Even then, to be fair, his poll ratings were reasonable. But what I would have been saying is he's in trouble, and there was so much riding on the vaccine rollout, and the fact that the vaccine rollout has gone well has given him a massive pass. So I think you can't understate how that has turned his fortunes around. But he is also, in some respects, the luckiest man in politics. He's also lucky because Keir Starmer, his principal opponent, does not seem to be able to land a blow on him at all. So that makes him lucky. But where I'd be interested in testing this question in 6 months' time is whether this government is its own worst enemy, and this idea of sleaze and chumocracy actually begins to just be something that's just casually attached to the government. So I'm not saying that they're going to collapse in the polls or that this is Starmer's great opening, but you might just get like in the 90s with Major, that there's this just slight whiff of, I don't know, moral decay, complacency, insiderism about this government. But even now, it doesn't make me feel like this is something that's existential to the government. What do people care about? They care about, am I going to be able to get out and see my family? Is my job going to be there? Is the sun going to be shining this summer? Can I get down the pub and have a barbecue? Those are the basic things, and I don't think that's changed at all. And if Boris can deliver that and a reasonable economic rebound, who cares about face mask procurement or Matt Hancock's family members?
Fair play. Talking about things that people care about, I was saying before we came on, I'd read a thing from somebody last night that said it's too much news, I can't cope with it. There's too much going on. There was Derek Chauvin and there was the Downing Street briefing room, which is very funny. But there's a football thing as well, and Mr. McPhail, who might have done a spot of lobbying himself in the past, asks, how could the Euro Super League money-grabbing snakes have played their stakeholder management better if public affairs and lobbying is about stakeholder management and getting those basics right?
Well, I have pondered this question because they have royally screwed it up, and I think this is one of those ones where most people would say, 2 minutes at any North London pub with Dave or Tony would have disabused you of any idea that this was going to fly. You didn't need highly paid consultants to tell you that. You needed to have some basic political antennae. And because this idea was developed in secret, I think, and nobody really knew it was coming. It was sort of dropped like a bombshell. There was no management of that at all, and it's unraveled in 48 hours. And what it also did was it gave the politicians to stretch the football analogy, an open goal. you can see a popular opposition to kind of greed and foreign ownership and all the rest of it. And all Boris has to say is, he said, I don't even care about football really, but I oppose this. And, you know, within 12 hours of him saying that, it's not because he said that, but the whole thing's crumbled. Yeah. Disaster.
Some wag did say if he jumped on those early Cobra meetings as quickly as he jumped on this,
yeah,
some of the things might have come out better. But I mean, it's sheer kind of populism, right? It's a gift for that, and it made me think that if we had been having this conversation 4 or 5 months ago, we'd have been talking about the end of Trump and Johnsonism and Trumpism and that kind of stuff. And I guess Boris does have a populist's kind of antenna for what will fly with, you know, Man and Clapham Omnibus and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
Is there anything inside that kind of change of tone or that change of zeitgeist that happened at the end of January that spells anything for Johnson? Because the other thing that brought it to my mind was that this briefing room farce, that was meant because he'd admired, I read somewhere, that how Trump did it.
Yeah.
Which can't be true, right? Surely he admired how President Bartlett in the West Wing did it, probably more than Trump. But is there anything changing in the water about how populism, I guess, Johnson style populism, is playing out?
Johnson is the great chameleon, isn't he? He seems wedded to a thing until he isn't. He's gone on this remarkable journey from kind of libertarian to you know, standing up in fact in the very same briefing room yesterday saying a third wave's coming, we can't move too quickly. I mean, he would never have recognized himself 12 months ago. So I think searching for internal consistency in Boris Johnson's actions is probably a bit too much, which is the classic sign of a populist, actually. What I would say is he doesn't have the his populism takes a slightly different, or he does take a different form from Donald Trump's, in that he, you know, you look at what this government is doing around COP26 and the environment. It's a very different form of populism. So I would say with Boris, you've always just got to watch. You know, I think he does watch which way the wind is blowing, and he's pretty inscrutable as well. And I don't think many people would claim really to know his mind, which is why him sticking to his guns on Brexit is all the more remarkable, actually.
Yeah,
because that's one everywhere he has been consistent, actually. Since he committed to the cause.
Right up from the point that he changed his mind, he was then very consistent. Yeah. Andy's asked a great question and is dragging us back to financial services. And I think this is a great question. So to set it out for you, and maybe you're familiar with this, but one of the frustrations I think that many people in the advice and planning professions have is that they feel a little bit voiceless. There's no stories except bad news stories come out about people getting ripped off and all that kind of stuff. And maybe if the advisors could make their voice heard a little bit better, then they could help. And obviously, there's self-interest in that, as there always is with these things. So Andy asks, how can an industry, doesn't quite ask it this way, but how can a sector that is basically an agglomeration of lots and lots of relatively small businesses get a decent public affairs and lobbying voice?
Well, the classic way to do that would be through an industry association. I mean, there's a reason why they exist, especially for industries where most are essentially on the S end of the SME business or sector, and really delegating upwards that responsibility to put to explain sort of coherently what the views of the sector are. Now, that's a question that ought to be asked of of the financial advice industry. Is that working effectively? It's not something I actually have a strong opinion on. I also think that advice has been knocked about really significantly by the regulators over the years. And if I think about, what's happened since I came into CICERO 15 years ago, there's sort of constant change in the structure of advice, what the qualifications are, what the liabilities are, the banks are in, the banks are out, all of this sort of stuff. And I think there's been such a lack of stability in some respects in the industry that it's very difficult for that coherent voice to form, because I think most businesses have probably been so overwhelmed with dealing with all the change that they've been handling over the years that looking upwards has probably been quite a challenging thing to do. And that's always the case again when you've got lots of typically smaller businesses who at the end of the day are more focused on making sure they can service clients, win clients, not screw up their advice. And probably that voice has been absent from some of the discussion in a way that it shouldn't have been. Sorry.
No, it's a great answer. And I was thinking about the industry bodies that are there, and there are a couple of them, and there are lots and lots of different stripes and hues of financial advice firms and planning firms, and sometimes there's a bit of a fight about we're this kind and we're better than you, and we're this kind and we think you smell of fish, and whatever it might be. But one thing that is true, kind of above that factionalism, is that there are a few very, very, very large financial advice firms, and they tend to be in the same trade associations as all these little guys. Is there an industry you can think of that navigates this well, where there's that kind of imbalance?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I'll take that question away, but it's and this is this applies in trade associations that have big firms in that. When you've got some mega players in an industry who are paying most of the membership fees, they have a disproportionate share of the voice. That's just the way it goes. And so the smaller members will have issues that they want to get on the table that the bigger members aren't so interested in, and that causes constant tension.
No, that makes sense.
But I suppose one of my colleagues, Mark Twigg, has thought about this over the years. It's not necessarily just about the form of the advice, like what kind of firm is it? Is it a small firm, a big firm? Are you providing it over the telephone? Are you doing it face to face? I don't know, whatever. It's this idea of the value of financial advice in the minds of the consumer. Like, this is why it's worth taking advice. This is why you should take advice and not rely on what you've Googled or what your mum and dad have told you, because your mum and dad will probably tell you, put it all into bricks and mortar. My brother-in-law sent me an email the other day asking me for advice, and I did signpost him to a professional advisor. Of course I did, but that's where people get their advice from. They don't. I think there is, but to change that requires investment in probably some form of industry campaign, and I'm not sure if that would ever really, if that's possible to do.
Yeah, I think if there were a whip round, I think many firms would say, well, we gave already with our FOSS levies and our PI insurance and all that kind of stuff, so that the cupboard is pretty bare. But it's a really, really interesting one, because there's so much good that's done in that sector, just the avoidance of harms that you can't really put a value on, because for someone like your brother, probably, that wouldn't do something daft other than ask you for help, obviously. But there's relatively little value in being told not to go for the biofuel plantation in Honduras or wherever. But for other people, they really do go for that, or London and Capital and Finance and these kind of mini bond things as well. So how do you get through this? Very tricky.
It's tricky. I also think that the regulator does have to. It's easy to slag off the regulator. I think historically the regulator has some questions to answer, and I think it has some questions to answer now. So, like, why is the government and the regulator not being more proactive on online scams? There's this big sort of thing like, oh well, it's, you know, it's beyond our reach or whatever, you know. And anybody that goes into Google and types certain search terms up are being served up, or you're on YouTube and you're getting served up ads for what are transparently scams. Where is the muscle here to like stop this from happening? And I think they're beginning to get on board with the fact that they need to be more proactive and muscular on this.
Nigel Farage's cryptocurrency, which sounds like an Alan Partridge horse race. From the day to day, you know,
monkey tennis sort of.
That's right. Yeah. What kind of reputation does the regulator have in political circles? Because we read stuff where they're getting a bit of a slap and being told they're not fit for purpose and that kind of stuff. But are they kind of looked down on, or are they valued, or what's their life like?
I think the PRA to a certain degree is somewhat above the fray, partly because we haven't had any significant systemic collapses or big collapses. So PRA generally is able to keep its head down, I think. FCA has a much harder job because it's conduct, and conduct's where all the screw ups that hit the Daily Mail, generally that's where they happen, is in conduct. And the market is constantly changing. People are learning different ways to rip people off or coming up with different ways to rip people off constantly. But I have to say the London Capital Finance issue has definitely impacted the reputation of the FCA. I think this prevalence of scams has impacted the reputation of the FCA. So I think there would be, amongst a lot of MPs, a bit of grumpiness about this idea of the regulator not being on top of it enough. And arguably, I'm afraid the politicians have got some blame for this, because they've been pushing the FCA to look at all these other different issues. And maybe there should have been more focus on some basic protection of consumers from harms.
Yeah. A little bit more on financial stuff. No surprise to anyone that this has been quite an expensive year for the country, and for advisors trying to navigate things like future tax planning and trying to work out, not necessarily you're going to tell a client to do one thing or the other, but just to be able to talk intelligently about this stuff with clients. What's your sense of how quickly things start to get winched back in and we start trying to pay this back?
So what the government has done before every major fiscal event, all these winter flat plans or summer plans, whatever, there's been kites flown about what pain is coming down the track. And I think a lot of that is building expectations for future changes, but they keep stepping back from it. And the reason they're stepping back from it is, funnily enough, you don't slap lots of taxes on an economy as it's just coming out of an economic shock. So I think what Rishi Sunak will do is a bit like Osborne did, is that there will be a balancing of the books, but the balancing of the books will be pushed back 1 year every year. So it's always coming at some future point. But with all that said, that I think we have to expect more taxes on unearned wealth taxes in general. The electoral coalition of the Conservative Party is changing big time, and red wall friendly policies are there, and I would say red wall friendly policies are not vindictive, in other words, soak the rich. But I think what they would be is, if people are earning income, if they're getting income from assets which are more favorably taxed than, for example, income, then I think there would be an argument for an equalization there. So where does that take you? That takes you into capital gains tax, into allowances, possibly into more tax for buy-to-let landlords. They've had enough already, but they're going to get more. Tom on the call, but for all the pensions guys, every single year we have, is this the end of higher rate relief? It never quite comes, but it's sat there. It's always there. Break the glass. collect 20 billion quid or whatever it is. You know, so none of those are politically costless, but I think the government may have to go there.
Yeah. And I guess the other kind of tricky bit with that is the sort of natural reaction of some planners, at least, is if when things start getting nasty in these kind of areas as they head offshore. And I wonder, you know, what your sense would be of what Brexit is doing in terms of the kind of internationalization of financial services. I guess it's more banking than anything else. But are we set for a time where it becomes very hard for us to do business elsewhere?
Oh, sorry. It's hard for British businesses to do business elsewhere.
For British individuals, so who might be looking to say, well, listen, I'm wealthy enough to think about where my money is domiciled.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, well, it is an interesting one there, isn't there? Because I think the data suggests that, for example, the London prime property market had an absolutely stonking year last year because sterling is relatively cheap. Now we've got Brexit resolved to some degree or another, and the world hasn't completely collapsed. The UK's COVID story has gone from being pretty ropey to being okay, actually. So I think some of those factors will always, you know, London remains an important global centre. I think those pull factors are there. Private schools in the UK are, you know, there are all these things that hold people with wealth here. But will people be weighing their options? I think they do constantly. I think the question is whether the government is that motivated by or worried about keeping the mega wealthy or the extremely rich here, or whether it's say, well, look, this is the way we run our country, and you can come here and enjoy our rule of law and your property rights and the freedom of speech, and your kids will be educated and all the rest of it. Or, but if you're not up for that, then, you know, fine. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, probably I'm kind of operating at a far less elevated level than you. I'm just trying to think about people looking for tax arbitrage, actually.
Yeah.
Some of the places that you might have found relatively easy to do business with pre-Brexit. I'm wondering about whether some of those kind of seize up a little bit, but it's it's just about the narrowing of the jaws of what those who aren't, you know, mega yacht owners and that kind of stuff, but are wealthy enough to have options about what they do. And this, I know that a lot of the kind of family offices and the kind of wealth managers at that end of the market they've got some quite a fast changing landscape in front of them.
Yeah, I think that's a fair question. I'm not sure I've got any particular insight on that question, to be honest, but I can. I think the fact that we're no longer in that single market presumably will erect barriers to the movement of capital, whether that's privately held that weren't there before.
Fair enough. And I can't have you on here and not make you talk about stuff north of the border, which occupies you, you know, every morning, noon, and night. Come on, what about Salmon and Sturgeon and Alba and the SNP? My friend's daughter is called Alba, and it's all getting very, very difficult.
Oh, that's a bit difficult. Yeah, for me, Alba was always the cheap stereo that you got at Argos. You've probably got an Alba cassette deck somewhere, or but it has been of big interest actually to our firm, partly because it's got the principals of our firm are Scots, and a number of my team members are Scots as well. So there's a personal interest as well as a business one. So where do we start? Where do we start on this? So as an Englishman, I would say that the whole affair has shone a light on the operation of Scottish politics and the Scottish government, which is unfavourable. That's not a political statement. I think that's just a statement of the fact that the inability of the Scottish Parliament to adequately get documents from the Scottish government is pretty concerning. I think the role of the Crown Office in pursuing journalistic outlets was concerning. I think the fact that it was the Spectator that went to court to secure the right to publish stuff that had already been put in the public domain was concerning. Like, where was the Scotland-based media and all of that? So I think there's been a kind of asleep at the wheel sort of thing in terms of democratic scrutiny of the operation of the Scottish government, and that's partly because of disinterest down here as well. That things have just been allowed to bubble on. So I think if there's a positive out of that, then you get a bit of an awakening of scrutiny and oversight of what's going on in Holyrood and what's going on in the Scottish government. Then you've got, of course, the saga behind it, which is Salmon and Sturgeon. Now, who knows what impact someone will have? I mean, he's not a popular man, is he? I mean, I think we can say that from the polling. Oh, no. He's not a popular man, but neither is he known for quietly just putting his tail between his legs and skulking off. So in that respect, what I wonder is whether he becomes a kind of a kind of Farage character for Scotland, where his existence and his platform is constantly dragging the SNP towards he's moving the Overton window on independence towards him, which is to move quicker, to be more decisive, because he's just there, right? His presence changes the discussion. But even my colleagues who are super tuned into what's going into Scottish politics wouldn't make a prediction about whether Nicola Sturgeon will secure a majority or not in May. Really? Partly because the view is that the second preferences are extremely volatile. A lot of people won't know which way where they're placing their second vote until they walk into the voting booth, and therefore that question of the sort of bifurcated impact of Alba is, does it build a supermajority for independence, or does it actually hurt Nicola Sturgeon? Nobody's really sure about at the moment, and we probably won't know the answer to. Well, we won't know the answer to that until the votes are counted.
It's a great point. Actually, I hadn't thought of it in the kind of Farage and Brexit kind of way. He is a similar figure to that, and it's kind of no one likes us, we don't care kind of thing. And he's fine with it. A friend of mine who's kind of stitched into the independence movement a little bit has no time at all for Salmon, and I was saying, but there's moon howlers out there that really do. And his thing, which he said with some conviction, was not as many as you think. It's sound and fury, and it's going to signify very little, but who knows, right? The other side of that, I guess, though, is whether Westminster resists and says you can have as big a majority as you like. We did this a few years ago, and we're not doing it again at the moment. What kind of appetite do you think there is for a fight?
It seems to me that the government strategy at the moment is just to say no. There's a question about whether it be no, but I think at the moment it's leaning towards no. And by saying no, you then knock it back to Nicola Sturgeon, because she then needs to decide how she responds to that. If the government says we're going to give you a referendum in a certain number of years' time, you've taken the heat off of her in some ways.
Yeah. If
you say no, she's got to then say, well, we can't do an extra constitutional referendum, and then, oh look, here's Alex Salmon saying, Sturgeon, you've sold out on independence, blah blah blah. Now, most Scots might not care, but those within the independence movement will be thinking, what should we be going for plan A or plan B on this one?
Yeah,
and that's a tricky place for her to be. The thing that the government, I think Westminster will be much more on the ball with this time is, okay, you can have potentially you can have a referendum, but we want to have Scots living abroad in the franchise. We are going to insist on this question, so they're not going to hand over control of the question to effectively to the SNP. I think there's going to be a lot of things that the government will engage in this time, if there is a referendum, that they just kind of left last time.
Brilliant. Listen, thank you very much. We are over our time, which is always inevitable when we have you on, John, and I wish we could keep going for lots longer, but we must leave it there. So thank you very much, as ever, for being so generous with your time. Maybe this time next year, eh?
Well, hopefully we might be able to do something in person at some point.
That would be nice. That would be nice. And I hope I know you're going back into the office pretty soon, you were saying earlier, so I hope that goes well for you.
Thank you.
Anybody needs any public affairs work and lobbying, then John does weddings, bar mitzvahs and funerals. And there we go. Next week we've got Pete Matthew. You all know Pete and the astonishing success of Meaningful Money. Steve will be talking to Pete next week, and you will definitely want to be part of that one. So watch out for the address and stuff to book in. In the meantime, thanks once again, everybody. Thank you to John, and we'll leave you to it. Lancat out.
Bye.